Niggas is taxing my son Skipper and Kowalski. If you don't know who those two niggas is, they're fucking penguins from the movie Madagascar, nigga. You must not have any childhood. But the reason why I bring up penguins is because in the tariff news that was announced on Wednesday, the Liberation Day tariffs, the Heard and McDonald Islands were listed as a territory that were going to be receiving reciprocal tariffs. But niggas was confused about that because if you didn't know, that's an Australian territory that's close to Antarctica and it has 0 human inhabitants. The only niggas that's living there is penguins. So there's 0 imports and exports going between them and the US. So that was one of few things that were very confusing for the news, but don't worry, I got me. I'm about to break down the rest. The second thing that was confusing was the White House estimates that was on the left, which is basically their estimates for what they believe the average tariff that was being imposed from those countries onto the US. And after niggas was doing some research and reverse engineering the formula that they used, they found out that they weren't actually averaging tariffs. They were actually using what's called a trade deficit, which is basically a trade deficit is when you're importing more goods from a country versus how many goods you're exporting to them. Basically, you're making less money off of them versus how much money they're making off of you, right? So what they did is that they took the imports and they took the exports, right? And then they took the exports and they divided it by the imports, which got them that percentage, right? So that's not exactly tariffs. So the way they labeled it was a bit misleading. And on the right-hand side was the reciprocal tariffs, which had a baseline of 10%, meaning that by force, minimum that those countries was getting on that list was 10% from the US. But they increased it based on how high of an offender they believe those other countries was. So for example, on that list, China had 34% as their reciprocal tariff. Meaning that in your everyday life, how it impacts you, niggas and shorties, think about your Shein and your Temu orders. Trump just closed a loophole, which basically was that those little like tiny orders and packages that's shipped from China to the US wasn't going to receive any taxes. But now you have the 34% reciprocal tariff and the additional 20% tariff that he had made from way before the Liberation Day added together. That's 54%. So you might not have as much sundresses this summer, and you might not have as much mini dryers and washers from Temu for me this summer either. So be prepared for that. Additionally, the car industry is also important because Trump announced that on May 3rd he's going to be levying a 25% tax on certain car parts. Mind you, there's already 25% tax on fully made cars that's imported from outside of the US. So the average car is expected to cost at least 5 to extra 10 bands.